there's something, and it may be imposed upon it since, but it's a nice thought anyway, something of the Scottish football support going over to Spain. There is a kind of a feeling that they liked their drink, and they were fun, and there was good crack. So I think that was there. It may be a bit romanticised over the years, but I think they were very open people. The men that went were we know them now. You've spoken to them. Were open, fun people who were interested in where they were going to. So they would have been extremely popular.
George Park was 12 when his father Alec, one of the older Scottish volunteers, went to Spain. He wrote home regularly describing the country he found.
I think the International Brigade just missed the cigarette smell. In fact, my father, in his letter, advises my mother to put, used to get 5 woodbine in a wee paper packet. Better to put 2 of these in a letter than anything else. Now, I don't know what like they were when they arrived. Probably they very carefully poured them out, and they had a bit of paper to roll a fag. In his letters, it says, in all sides, they get greeted with salute, camarada. He didn't speak Spanish. But says, it's one thing we can meet, salute, camarada, even the children.
Many of the comforts enjoyed by the volunteers were provided by Scotland's energetic Aid Spain movement. With the British government refusing to intervene in the Spanish Civil War, across the country, ordinary Scots hastily arranged aid organisations. Scotland rallied to the Republican cause with remarkable speed and commitment. The Scottish aid movement was characterised by a poverty-defying generosity above and beyond the call of duty.
Well, there was a massive humanitarian Aid Spain movement which was carried on by communities, local organised groups, Spanish medical aid committees. Strangely, to an extent, the higher echelons of the trade union movement were very much engaged in the government's policy of non-intervention, and that means not touching it with a barge pole. And I know that certainly a number of trades councils and other union bodies had difficulties in working with aid organisations for Spain because the Communist Party was very involved, and at that time there were what was called the bans and prescriptions on involvement of communists within some of the trade union movement. But the whole movement took off. There was a huge, across the social scale, from the Fife miners right through to the Duchess of Atholl, from very sort of deep poverty, people going that extra mile to make contributions towards the Spanish people.
Every year, history teacher Paul Philippou lays flowers on the grave of James Moyer, a Perth man killed fighting in Spain. Whilst researching the role of Perthshire in the Spanish Civil War, Paul was struck by the Duchess of Atholl's contribution.
The Duchess of Atholl was the first female MP in Scotland, a Conservative MP, and by rights should possibly not have been a Republican supporter. But she travelled to Spain and saw, and what she saw so appalled her. She wrote a book called Searchlight of Spain, which sold over 30,000 copies, and she became an active supporter of the Republic and of democracy in Spain. And that obviously fell foul of her own party, who eventually hounded her out.
Atholl defied her party's stance on the Civil War to spearhead a number of campaigns, becoming chair of the National Joint Committee for Spanish Relief. A conservative, working alongside left-wing groups, she was duly nicknamed the Red Duchess. The Aid Committee organised concerts, fiestas and film showings to raise both funds and awareness, and Flag Days for Spain became a regular feature of Scottish life. A large proportion of Aid for Spain work was carried out by working-class women, the volunteers of the home front. They were often inspired by the work of the Red Duchess, demonstrating the social breadth of the aid movement in Scotland. Scots commandeered prams to collect food from door to door, rattled tins on street corners, and energetically organised fundraising events.
My mother was very active. My father, in one letter, asked her to make sure that his union dues, his union card's paid up. In another letter, he mentions one of the guys who went out with him, guy from Springburn, and would she go up and see his wife. So my mother was very much involved with looking after dependents and things like that. But what I always remember is that on a Saturday, we'd go up, we lived at the bottom of Fakin Street, Duke Street end. We'd go up to the top, to Cumbernauld Road, and the row of shops there, the biggest shop at that time was a cooperative. And we'd go up, we'd have what every family had, the green baize table for playing cards. And we'd have it up for collections for Spain. And women come out to our shops would put a tin of condensed milk, tin of bully beef, tins of this and that, which was for Spain. Sometimes they put a couple of pennies in a wee bowl. And we did that every Saturday, my brother and I. The other thing is a food ship went from Spain and the crew didn't take any wages.
To boost support for the cause, Aberdonian Bob Cooney sent home a Republican flag that had been draped around the bodies of 2 local brigaders slaughtered in Spain.
Bob Cooney had sent it back from Spain. It was used as the shroud for 2 Aberdonians who died in Spain, Archie Dewar and Tom Davidson. And Cooney, in his wisdom, quite rightly so, decided to send that flag back to the Women's Aid Committee in Aberdeen, who then made a small banner down the side of it from the Aberdeen boys fighting in Spain. And they hung that on the walls in the halls around Aberdeen when they did their meetings to raise aid for Spain.
In Montrose, women were behind the creation of a centre for Basque refugee children exiled from Spain as the Luftwaffe's bombs began to fall on Guernica.
There were a whole range of fundraising activities, concerts, film shows put on around Dundee and the surrounding areas to raise money to keep the Basque children, to feed them. And 24 of them ended up at the Dundee Free Breakfast Missions Holiday Home, which was Mole Park House in Montrose, and 24 arrived there in September 1937. And 2 of them ended up staying after the war. They stayed in Dundee, married Dundonians, and the son of one of them, Tom Boland, was able to unveil a plaque at Mole Park House last October to commemorate the fact that his mother and another 24 Basque children stayed there for a couple of years, fleeing the bombing of their Basque homeland.
Resources were provided too for medical aid committees which supplied doctors and nurses for the hospitals of Spain. Most notable of these was Aberdeenshire-born Annie Murray, whose brothers Tom and George served in the international brigades. Annie worked as a nurse in Spain for almost the entire duration of the war. She provided an outstanding level of care in torrid conditions, even donating her own blood to patients. Predictably, Annie witnessed more horror in Spain than most. She wrote home to describe one particular incident close to Barcelona.
Italian aeroplanes had dropped pretty little cigarette and chocolate boxes with hand bombs neatly packed inside. The poor little mites of children picking up what they took to be the long-desired chocolate and quickly opening them were suddenly left handless, their faces burned beyond recognition. Nothing could surely be more brutal. What a bloody awful war this has been.